Okay, so I want to add some information. I want to provide some more information. We haven't had a chance to discuss this yet, but I'm also sharing it with the group. But this is really kind of really directed towards you. So this yesterday, sorry, today's Sunday. Friday, I shipped out overnight for Saturday delivery a Spectrum, the RS A2000, the same one you've got. Spectrum analyzer.
Yep.
I shipped that overnight as well as some various directional finding antennas. But more importantly, how do I show? I want to share. Hold on a second, Richard. I want to
share screen.
Well, no, hold on. What I want to do is instead of sharing a screen, because I don't. This is a PDF that I've already put into the Discord, into the L-band chat. What I want to do is add it to this conversation right now. It's just a link.
You can open it and then share your screen so that we can see it.
Well, I could do that with a PDF. All right, so let me just do that with the. See, share your screen.
Yeah. And one point, Greg, if I may say so, we are recording this session. If this is okay for you?
Yeah, that's okay.
Perfect, thank you.
No worries.
So Tommy, because we record this, it is easier if you share your screen.
Okay. Can you see the shared screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody see that? Okay. So what's happening here is we make this directional find. Uh-oh, your stream is still. Why is it saving that?
It's working, Tommy. We see your screen.
On my end, it says your stream is still. Oh, I get it. Okay, sorry. Okay, that's a note to me. That's like when the note comes up on the teleprompter and you read the note. Now clap. Okay.
Clap hands. Bravo.
All right. So this is a directional finding antenna that we've got. So inside this antenna, we've got literally 16 little blades that go all the way around in a 360, and they're all directional as opposed to an omnidirectional. So now anything comes up in 360 degrees, I can now pinpoint it right onto my topographical map. So we have this directional finding package that has several tools in it, software tools that would package with this antenna. Wow. So what's happening is I just sent them the same analyzer you have, and this antenna is shipping out via freight. This is a big antenna. It's like 4 feet. So this is going out to them this week as well. Yeah. And so this is what I'm hoping. We're doing this as a trial run. They bought the other gear, but I'm donating this to see if this is going to work as well as I think it will. But all they have to do is mount this on top of that. Well, you don't know this. They built a observation deck platform out in the middle of this field, their property. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's probably 2 stories tall. This would be perfect to go right on top of that. And that's what I'm talking to them about, installing it up there. Mm-hmm. So anyways, this is going out to them. So here in the next couple of weeks, they'll have that installed. Monday, as in tomorrow, the reason why I overnighted all this equipment to them is because Monday is the film crew shows up. Well, they've already shown up, but they start filming on Monday for next season. Mm-hmm. And so all this equipment that I sent out there to them is what they're going to be using as a primary tool for research or, RF research. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I want you to know. What was the other thing? And then of course we've got the directional finding. I'll share this with you later. I'll send you a link to the we've got a YouTube link that you can go to and watch the directional finding software. It's a topographical map, shows where everything when something penetrates into an area and all what it looks like and all that. I'll share that with you later, but I just wanted you to be aware that we are sending this antenna out there. And I've reached out to them, both Brandon, the owner, and Eric, the scientist on the show, as I've just been discussing with the team, to try and coordinate all of our efforts into a single effort worldwide on signal finding, whether it's 1.6 gigs or whatever it is. I'm waiting to hear back from him on that. I think there's going to be some licensing issues, like, you know, you've got an NDA that says you can't say anything before it airs, right? So there might be some of that going on, and so we might have to be tiptoeing around that. Well, first off, they're not going to say anything to us before it actually airs. Although Eric has been open, and so is Jim Segalia, about some of this information, even that hasn't aired. So that's cool. You know, it's not like it only is, you know, we're only allowed to know what's being aired, I guess. Beyond that, I guess
May I put a question?
we just have a lot of questions. Huh? Yeah,
May I raise a question? Is this a passive antenna, or is there a moving part inside?
it's passive.
It's passive. Okay.
Yeah.
So what else do people need? So your idea is to set up 4 stations worldwide. Is this true?
Yeah, right now, okay, so we use these antennas for drone finding, so usually it is a triangulation, you know, 2 or 3 antennas, well, 2 or more, let me just say, antennas. And so they use them for airports, they use them for military bases, they use them to take them out if they're just doing drills in certain areas. They put them on trucks and make it all mobile. The idea is to get one out to Skinwalker Ranch just to confirm that this thing, since they've got so much activity, we should be able to confirm that this will work.
Okay. So you take Skinwalker Ranch as a test bed.
Yeah. And if it works, we'll put it in the more prominent areas. Like, that's one of the questions that I've got for Greg is, if you were to do something like this, where would you put it? So, but yeah, this is the kind of stuff I want to put worldwide, and I want to put one on every continent. But first, we got to figure out what tests to run. What's the proper way to do this before we just throw stuff out there? Because these are like $40,000 antennas. But I'm game. I'm willing.
All right. Okay.
So what else can I tell you? So I'm waiting. Yeah,
Spectrum
waiting to hear back
analyzer. What spectrum analyzer is Skinwalker Ranch using? The spectrum.
They're using right now. The one that I overnighted to them is an RSA 2000, which goes up to 8 gigahertz. But the one that they bought was an 18 gigahertz. We're just not delivering it until December. So in the meantime, they're using my unit until then. And they're using a Hyperlog directional 10 gig antenna, as well as they'll be using this big array here. So,
as long as Skinwalker Ranch is the first test bed, and as long as Skinwalker Ranch is not saying, that can be used, and we develop the protocol for the use of that device with the spectrum analyzer. So we wait until that happened with Skinwalker Ranch, right?
Well, no, hold on. So there's two parts to that story.
Right.
Greg's already got one, so we can work with Greg.
Okay.
Right. So we can work with Greg's site.
Yeah, I don't even use much of the laser, but yeah, that's a cool antenna. But I wish I had it, but I don't have the budget for that just yet.
Yeah.
So
the goal is, okay, well, here's the thing, though. If Skinwalker Ranch doesn't take it, I'll be more than happy to ship it to you. We can do demos out there, right?
I would love it. Yeah.
And then if it works, maybe you guys can buy it later. Just let's see.
Yeah.
We just need to do some testing first. I know this will work. We just got to know what's the right protocols, though. So yeah, no problem there. But anyways, so the goal is, if we can get one location to work, then we know what to do on the second one and the third one. I just wanted to get the first one going. And since Greg's got an analyzer and now they've got an analyzer, well, they both have the same Hyperlog antenna, so that's at least the same there. The only thing that would be different is that Skinwalker Ranch will have this array. But like I said, we've got Greg's location, we've got Skinwalker Ranch location, we have my location, here in Dallas, and then we'll just take it from there.
All right.
Now, Greg, you mentioned you guys are putting, unless I'm saying this wrong, you guys are putting a dish out in Area 51. Is that right?
So we're not exactly in Area 51. We're in the northern part, or central part, should I say, of Nevada. We are planning on building a massive array radio telescope, like probably the largest you've ever seen. It's going to be 2,000 dishes. Each of the dishes is 5 meter wide. The area, for people who speak in kilometers, the area of the telescope will be 19 kilometers by 15 kilometers. It's going to be massive.
Wow.
The reason why we picked Nevada is because, first of all, the density of population is much lower than anywhere else in the U.S., which is good for radio astronomy because any active transmitter around us just saturates us and prevents us from doing astronomy. Um, and also the valleys there are wide enough, large enough for setting this up there. Now, things that I've learned very recently is that Nevada is also a very good test bed for the Air Force for trying out some testing, combat situation in the desert, which might be a massive issue. But now the plan is, to set up this telescope there. Beginning construction should be late 2023. It would take probably a couple of years to build the whole array. So that's a plan. And the reason why I have the spectrum analyzer, actually two of them, is because we're going out in the desert there to monitor the spectrum over weeks to have a better idea of what spectrum occupancy is, what kind of transmitter do we find over there, what do they correspond to, and how can we mitigate any transmission by either collaboration with transmitters. So think about LTE transmitters, cell phones, cell towers. We have the Navy or the Air Force that's operating radars and whatnot. We're trying to mitigate them or include in our design, in our telescope design, ways to just notch out these particular frequencies that we just don't want to deal with. So that's the reason why we go over there and we have these spectrum analyzers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have specific frequencies that you're already monitoring, looking for?
So the telescope will operate from 700 megahertz up to 2 gigahertz, and we are monitoring beyond that just to make sure that we don't pick up some weird harmonics from other frequency bands. So we're monitoring DC to about, at this stage, up to 3.2 gigahertz.
Yeah.
Which is just the reason for that is just we max out the capacities of the spectrum analyzers that we have at the moment, which are not the Aeronia, they're Siglent spectrum analyzers, and these go up to 3.2 gigahertz. So we use the Aeronia mostly for capturing IQ data from cell towers, from whatever transmitters we find. Because another way of mitigating interference is if the transmission is not continuous but pulsing, we can get a better apprehension on how to sort of flag in time, activity like signals.
Yeah.
And just keep the time frames where it's silent and discard everything where the transmission is. So, for instance, a radar, if you think about it, some radars they operate at, I think around 1200 megahertz. We have some airplane Air Force radars. These transmit one massive burst, but only every maybe 10 seconds or so. I think it's about six pulses per minute. Yeah. So we're trying to get just a better apprehension of the time signature of these different signals and trying to notch them in time. And so we can operate whenever they're not transmitting, which is another way of mitigating the interference.
Okay, so I have a question now that you've had a chance to work with the RSA 2000. It has the ability, it comes standard with 80 megahertz real-time bandwidth, but it can go up to 245. Is that matter to you? Have you considered it? And if not, why?
Yeah, actually, the one we have the option of going up to 180 megahertz of real-time bandwidth. We don't have the 240. It's just a little bit too expensive and not necessary for us.
Yeah.
But
Well, hold on. That's
yes.
what I'm asking. Well, that's what I'm asking. The technology-wise, I would have thought you would have, forget about the price. I would have thought that you wanted the 245 for what we're trying to do. No?
So it's not necessary. What we want to do is, for instance, monitor the cellular frequency band, which goes from about 700 megahertz up to 850.
Sure.
And so what we have at the moment is just perfect. Like it matches that frequency band, and and we can record that in real time, and it's fantastic. I don't think we would do anything different if we had 240 megahertz at this stage.
Okay. So I just envisioned that would actually help. All right. So next question on the waterfall, the 3D waterfall. Have you had a chance to work with that yet?
Oh yeah. No, I'm recording waterfall plots. So usually what I do is use the software to monitor over a few hours. Use a compression in time so that I don't have as many spectra as sort of. I use the max peak so that I just keep whatever is maximum in the spectra. And usually I export the waterfall plots in CSV files that I will then process in MATLAB or Python, depending on what kind of signal I'm searching for.
So on this 1.6 gigahertz, kind of jumping into this for a second, on this 1.6 gigahertz, we're trying to determine whether it's modulated or not, or if it's just dirty air, energy, whatever. It seems to be coming obviously through an L-band satellite signal, but how do you demodulate that? So what I envisioned in my mind was that the 3D waterfall would be ideal tool to be able to show us a pattern within the signal. Am I thinking wrong on this?
You're thinking almost right. The problem with the waterfall plot is that you set up the parameters of the waterfall plot, meaning frequency resolution, time resolution, and you might not necessarily match optimally because if the signal is frequency modulated, then yes, you would see some variation in the frequency. Like if you look very closely, yes, you might. But frequency modulation is just one type of modulation. There are many others. Amplitude modulation, phase modulation, and then like all sorts of combination of all of them. So if you have a waterfall plot, it gives you a little bit of information, but because you do not see a variation in frequency, doesn't mean that the signal is not modulated. The only way for you to answer that question is to record IQ data, which for people who are not familiar with that, that means the actual baseband voltage stream, right? Yep. Like exactly the voltage stream that is captured by the antenna. Doing so, first of all, you can plot the signal in time. So you pick up your bandwidth, you go from, I don't know, like maybe you use a bandwidth of a few kilohertz around 1.6 gigahertz. You record the IQ data. You can plot in time the signal. And you can also regenerate waterfall plots at various time and frequency resolution. But what matters is looking at the amplitude variation of the signal, frequency variations, and all sorts of parameters that you can think of. The only way really to confirm that the signal is modulated or not is doing this. Now, this 1.6 gigahertz, I've looked a little bit into that, and I would really encourage all of you, if there's any signal that's being detected, to use the ITU frequency allocation chart. which you can find online. So the ITU is the International Telecommunication Union. It's sort of the big organism that is taking care of frequency allocation, making sure that nobody interferes with anyone.
Yeah.
And if you look at the chart, there's actually a 1.6 gigahertz band, which starts, I believe, at 1.559 gigahertz and up to 1610 megahertz. And this band is allocated to GNSS, so it's geopositioning systems. The 1.6 gigahertz band in particular is used by GLONASS, the Russian geopositioning system, right? So USA has GPS, Europe has Galileo, and Russia has GLONASS, which are all different constellations of different satellites. I believe GLONASS has at the moment 24 satellites that are operational. They transmit at 1.6 gigahertz. So it's very likely that what you're gonna see, if you're very sensitive, is simply the GLONASS signal. I ran a test just. Excuse me.
Okay. Would
Yeah.
you see, when you say you see when a satellite moves over the hemisphere, it takes a couple of seconds, even minutes to pass over. So during that time, you would record that signal directed with a directional antenna and knowing it's coming directly from that point. But what if the signal is not coming from there?
So it's really likely that you're going to find a signal coming from sort of everywhere, which is the way your cell phone, for instance, capture your the GPS signal to localize you. It's these signals ideally they're detected in a direct line of sight, but they are also how do you call that diffractions on the ionosphere, which makes the signal sort of coming from a little bit everywhere at a weaker strength. So what I was about to say is yesterday I set up I used the Aronia V6 in a backyard with a log periodic antenna. Unfortunately, I was not sort of sensitive enough with the antenna. The antenna was not sensitive enough. The spectrum analyzers, I maxed out all the amplifying options, but I did find a 1.6 signal, 1.6 gigahertz signal all the time. It's not. I was trying to capture it during the pass of the satellite. So each of the satellites, they I think their orbit it takes about 11 hours to come back to the same point. Or to fly around the Earth. I was trying to capture it. Unfortunately, I was not around when the satellite passed, and I was just leaving my log periodic antenna, which is very directional. Unfortunately, I missed the actual time where the satellite passed over me. But what I found is that there is a 1.6 gigahertz signal that's all the time there. Probably not sensitive, probably not strong enough for a device to be detected. But what I believe that is simple refraction on the ionosphere, so the ionized layer of the atmosphere. That sort of the signal bounces on it and sort of diffracts all over the place, and it seems like it comes from everywhere. It doesn't. It's just like a weak sort of artifact from that signal. And I've been looking at that. I watched that episode. Tommy, you told me like the episode 5, season 3 of Skinwalker Ranch, and I truly believe that. So first of all, they're using a Yagi antenna, which is it's directional for sure, but it's pretty wide beam.
Yeah.
Looking at the 1.6 gigahertz, because they were very impressed by the fact that the signal appears and disappears. To me, it's just a sign of a satellite passing by. It's just the satellite crosses the beam, transmits at 1.6 gigahertz, and then leaves the beam and disappears again. How do you confirm this? Well, it's pretty simple. You try the same experiment with another satellite. The only issue is trying to figure out where the satellite in the sky will be and position your antenna in the right direction. But that's just the best way to confirm not that this is what they saw. I would like to try this. Maybe this week, if I have some time, I will try to capture an actual pass of one of those satellites and try to capture the actual signal. But I have like a massive waterfall plot right now. I captured lots of data yesterday. Where you see this 1.6 gigahertz, always there, always there.
So, Greg, may I put a question? So, Greg, how would you go about if you get such a signal? How would you go about analyzing that signal? What would be your first steps?
So, as I said, you should absolutely record the IQ data. Now, usually when you see a strong peak, it's usually the carrier signal, the strong carrier signal that helps devices like your phone to sort of lock on a particular frequency. But the actual message, the modulated part, is on the sides of this big peak in the spectrum. So you need to record the IQ data, but over a sort of larger bandwidth than just the peak. And then there are many tools. We're talking about waterfall plots, and I think waterfall plot is definitely the first step to have a better comprehension of the time and frequency variation of the signal.
Yeah.
You need to plot it in time to see maybe the amplitude variation, the power variation. Plot a histogram of your sample, because a histogram shows you sort of the distribution in time of the samples. Like, is the signal always there, or do we have like sometimes where we are low power and sometimes where we have high power, which means that the signal is sort of transient or periodic, not necessarily periodic, but transient in the sense it's not transmitting continuously, but just by bursts or by little time frames. And then there you know, it would take hours of conversation to really discuss signal analysis and identification. But there are some techniques, for instance, what is called cyclostationary techniques, which sort of dig into the statistics of everything that is periodic in a signal and helps you identifying the modulation of the signal and helps you demodulating it. There's a lot of literature on that topic, and I can definitely give you some references if needed. There are also software packages that are developed for you put your CSV file in the code in the code, and it just does that for you. It shows you the plot of all the different statistics of the signal, and this is the best.
Yeah.
Aside of that, really, it's up to the person that runs the analysis to, it's their own judgment on what's best to do for analyzing.
Yeah. So our goal is actually to create and develop autonomous stations without user input. How would you go about such if you dismiss any hands on the data? If the software has to quickly analyze a signal and say, okay, make it simple, human modulated or known modulation versus unknown or not modulated.
Right. So to do so, if you want a completely standalone system, autonomous, you would want to monitor the spectrum, detect as quickly as possible any excess in power at any frequency, lock on that frequency, and download the actual IQ data if you have access to them. Or not necessarily, just record some waterfall plot data. And then, if the signal comes back, well, actually, it's a matter also of logging. Every signal that's been detected, what we call in SETI candidates or hits, We just log them. We know frequency, time of the day, day of the week of the year, etc., etc., and see whether the signal comes back. And also, if you have any directional, that really matters, like the direction of arrival of the signal. Log everything and understand whether the signal comes from the local sky or does it.
Oh, he dropped out.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, ET. Yeah. So does it come back? If it comes back, do the same thing, download the waterfall plot, and run some sort of correlation. You can measure the correlation between one instance of the signal and the other instance of the signal. If they're highly correlated, that means that it's the same signal. If they're not correlated, it's not the same signal.
Okay.
But don't worry too much about real-time detection and real-time analysis. What you need is having as many stations as possible, observe the same signal, download the data, and triangulate and make sure that we've seen that the signal has been seen by many stations at the same time, at the same frequency, exactly the same characteristics, and then it becomes a valid signal. Keep in mind that one single station, when it's autonomous, could have many artifacts. There are so many things that could happen in the system that could, lead into a signal detection or a hit, and it's not necessarily a real signal. So the only way to confirm that the signal was real, that the detection was real, is having at least 2 stations, ideally more than 2, which is part of the SETI protocol, by the way. There's no reason of doing SETI with just one single telescope. If the signal is transient, it doesn't continuously transmit, then we need to have multiple telescopes observing the same area of the sky at the same time to confirm that the signal was real. Yeah. So priority, downloading data, storing it. Don't worry about the real-time analysis. Store that. Get back to it later. It really matters to download the signal.
Yeah, I agree.
So for setting up for testing, I get this, Tommy. If we do these basic tests right now, but in the future we need something that is really going autonomously. A software does this autonomously without input, without downloading or logging somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Right. So my question would be on when you're referring to this type of searching, what is your opinion about the quality of the SDR equipment being, cheap versus expensive? So our goal, as I told you, was to get one of these stations in everybody's hands, but not have to spend $10,000 just for the station. So everything that we look for is going to be stuff on the open market that's hopefully 1,000 or less. As you know, you can buy SDRs for as cheap as $100, or you can buy them as expensive as 100,000. I have a strong feeling towards the fact that the cheaper you go, the less accurate your chips are, and the less accurate your tests are. What are your feelings about all that?
I don't think that's true. Certainly, the quality of the amplifier might be different between a cheap version and a more expensive version of an SDR, which matters if you're looking for a weak signal. Having good amplifiers does matter. But one of the big difference between cheap and expensive SDR is the frequency coverage. It's the bandwidth of it. The cheap SDR, and I've been working a lot with the little dongle, SDR dongle.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. So these are great, but the bandwidth that you can access at all times is it's pretty, it's maybe 10 megahertz or so, which is like, where do you put these 10 megahertz? Like, do you put them at 1.6 gigahertz, and then you miss out about all the rest of the spectrum? which is
Right.
not it's not great.
Right.
More expensive versions of the SDR. Well, that's the thing. Like, just know what your capabilities are. If you're looking for a 10 megahertz, yeah, go for a cheap SDR. If you're looking for a strong signal, it doesn't matter whether you get expensive or cheap. What does matter is for you to remember how much bandwidth you're processing at one time. The more expensive, I don't know about $10,000 or $100,000, but I know some that are like about $5 grand. They do, I don't know, something like 400 megahertz of band at each time, and you can of course switch from one band to another every second or even faster than that. That's no problem, but you know that each time you process 400 megahertz, you will not process the same part of the spectrum at all times. You might be missing out.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the issue in SETI, right? When we don't know what signal to look for, we just have to be as wide as possible at all times, and that's why we operate SETI from below 100 megahertz up to TSX band, like the higher the better. L band is of a particular interest because propagation of the waves are much better. Lower frequencies, if you try to find something that's out of space, lower frequencies are not great because most signals are highly attenuated by the atmosphere, and higher frequencies are not ideal as well because the propagation is not as great through the universe. So L band is great, and that's also the reason why most communication signals are in L band. And it's a mess for SETI because most of the signals that you detect are all interference from local transmitters. But yeah, put whatever, like 10 megahertz is fine. 10 megahertz, and you just scan the whole L band or go as high as possible or as low as possible. We're not really in the search for UAPs. It doesn't matter to go not too low or not too high. Like we can search any frequencies, but when you choose an SDR, just know what the capabilities of this SDR is. I would always go for wider bandwidth because it matters to see the whole spectrum, as much of the spectrum at one given time. Instead of just rotating one spectral window after the other, because you miss in time variation, of course. So yeah, I would always go for the most expensive if you have the budget. If you don't, just know what your capabilities are and try to deal with it.
So what I was thinking on that note, Richard, was maybe what we do is we do the simple tests, amplitude, histogram, the stuff that pretty much everybody's going to have on the masses, but then on the strategic ones, we actually use the higher end spectrum analyzers.
Yeah, I think first we do this test
mute.
setup.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
You're muted.
Yeah, I heard you. Okay. Yeah, so I think your strategy is good. First, we do these test setups just to find out whether the equipment is right, and if we can. So Greg, there's one question that puzzles me. If the ITU has a list of spectra users, does it also give the idea of modulation for each particular frequency or use case?
No, so the ITU allocates frequencies to different services. The 1.6 gigahertz band, it's an international band, and then it's really possible. The ITU doesn't oversees the whole necessarily the whole spectrum. You need to go back to the national/local frequency allocations, meaning.
Yeah.
For instance, if something is detected in the US, then you use the NTIA or ITU allocation chart from the US. And if it's detected in Germany, you use the German one. Everything is public. It's totally public information. what I do when I detect something is, so first of all, I refer to the chart. I look at in what band has the signal been detected. And then you can literally Google, put on Google stop frequency, megahertz from the band that you found the signal in, and you find a full description of what's going on in this band. Who is operating it? Is that
Wow.
Actually, let me just show you. Can I share my screen real
Yeah,
quick?
go
Of
for it.
course.
Okay, let's try that. So go live. Is that the way you do it?
It's
Do you
working.
guys see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So here's an example of the American, the US allocation chart. So it's very packed. It goes from 0 hertz to 300 gigahertz,
Yeah.
which is where most of the allocations are. There are allocations beyond that, but I don't think it really matters for us because we're not really looking at frequencies that are that high. And then when you look a little bit closer, and it took me a while to understand how to read this chart. It's not an easy thing to do. But for instance, here, I look at the 1.6 gigahertz band, which is right here. Is that big enough on your side?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Okay. So what you see here is that this band in particular, so 1559 to 1610, is allocated to radio navigation, aeronautical. So that's airplanes. Some transmitters from airplanes use this band for GPS purposes. So they transmit signals or they receive signals that give them an indication of their location, accurate location. And then there's another one that matters a lot for that signal that's been detected, which is radio navigation satellites. That's GNSS, GPS, Galileo, GLONASS, etc., which is, as stated, space-to-Earth signal or space-to-space signal. Space-to-Earth is what really matters for us. Because that's, we've detected something that comes from space or from the sky, whatever. So you find this chart, and you can find this chart for every country, right? Every country has their own chart. It may be easy or not, but there's always like an organism that can lead you to finding this table of allocations. And then
Okay.
once you've detected a signal at 1.6 gigahertz, look at the beginning, the start and stop frequency of that band, and then you will find a full description of that particular band. And this is fantastic information. This is what, that's just the protocol that you should engage whenever you detect anything. So
Okay,
that's
let me interject
which
something
is
great.
sure.
On the show, they're spiking at 16 at 16423 and 16523. So
Yeah.
it's
So you
not
do the
even
same
showing
thing.
on the chart here.
No. But however, when I watched the episode, I looked closely at the spectrum, and it was at 1.6. Like one of them was detected at 1.6 exactly.
It
But
was. You're right.
yeah. But same thing. Like look at it's just so crowded around here. It's a lot of
Yeah.
space to Earth, Earth to space signals, and also don't think that because it's Earth to space that you will not detect it on Earth. It's not necessarily very directional, and some of the signal will be reflected on the ionosphere, on the atmosphere. So as I said, then you look into the document. It's usually a few pages long. It tells you some administrative details that you don't want to bother with. But for instance, so here it tells you what this Space to Earth service is, which is so GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems. And the one that I was most interested in is, let me find it real quick. So we have Galileo. Yeah, here it is. So Russian Federation, so GLONASS operates in that band, which is 1598, 1605. Now, Richard, to answer your questions about how do we do for understanding, for knowing what kind of modulation that is, or if it's modulated at all, you need to dig into the document. The document will not tell you what kind of signal is used. Most of the time, sometimes it does, but rarely. And then you need to use Google. Just Google. You look at GLONASS, for instance. there is if it's GLONASS, you add signal plan, which usually leads you to a website that describes more accurately what kind of signal these are transmitting.
Perfect. Yeah.
And look at this. That's a 1600 megahertz. Looks pretty similar to what was shown on the show, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A spectrum. So no surprise there. And all the different peaks correspond to different satellites, etc. Side lobes. So that's the protocol. If you want to really find out what kind of modulation is employed, that's the way to go.
Awesome. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So is from your
I can help you with finding the charts or the information if you need them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
would be
awesome.
very
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
Hey, Craig, sorry, Tommy, one question to Craig.
Yeah.
Would there be, if the modulations are then known from the ones like GLONASS, Galileo, GPS, and so forth, if the modulations are known, isn't there a simple, wow, Lionel, your microphone is,
Excuse me.
okay,
Excuse me, my daughter's being loud. Muting myself.
no worry. So is there a kind of a quick test to check whether a signal is GLONASS or Galileo? Is there an algorithm? Do you use such algorithms?
Yeah, there is actually. So if you use SDR, you can use New Radio. A New Radio has, if you're familiar with the software, it's just a software suite. It's Python based, really easy to use. It's blocks. So basically, you have your SDR and you put a bunch of blocks behind it, and one of the blocks are GLONASS demodulation. Everything is public information for this kind of signals. Like keep in mind that if it's Air Force or whatever, like military, of course you will not find ways to demodulate it because that's the whole purpose. But you can still look closely with the techniques that I mentioned earlier to see whether the signal is modulated or not. But yeah, if it's GLONASS, absolutely. Like you can read the coordinates of the signal. You can read it out. I mean, this is what a cell phone does, right? Whether if your cell phone has been purchased in Russia, then that's exactly the signal that's going to read.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Okay. Got
GPS.
it.
Yeah. So you can put some blocks behind your antenna, and the blocks will read the information out of it. Really is a way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Good point. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
I should mention something about. I think Tommy, you suggested transmitters that would transmit that signal at 1.6 gigahertz and see if UAP would appear. I would not recommend that at all. This is because. So, as I said, there is a frequency allocation chart. If you start transmitting at the same frequency that's been allocated to another service, that means that you're interfering with that service. Which can be undetected, or it can be detected, reported to the FCC in the US, for instance. The FCC is the Federal Communications Commission.
I'm from broadcast. I'm 100% on board with what you're saying. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, because you could be fined like very heavily. Like I'm talking about millions of dollars of fine if you're jamming with anyone. You can, however, if you wanted to conduct such an experiment, you can file an application to the FCC and explain what you want to transmit. You don't even have to get into the details of what's the purpose of the transmission, but they would tell you. For instance, if they agree, they would tell you, okay, you can transmit at that much power over that time frame from that hour to that hour, and that's it, and you're limited to that. one of my concerns about the Skinwalker Ranch is that they're transmitting, and possibly they have legal teams behind them that are taking care of making sure that the transmission is legal. If it's not, they're in trouble big time. If the FCC watches the episode, of course. Don't do that, because also we are doing radio astronomy in a very passive way. There's no active transmission. It's purely passive, which is absolutely fine. Like, nobody cares about that, because anyone can have an antenna and watches the spectrum whenever they want. You guys are interfering with us. If you stop transmitting, we need to know what's going on, and we need to protect the spectrum as much as possible. Whenever yeah.
It's understood. Well, then I guess that means you would rule out using lasers too, then?
Yes, please say yes.
No, I don't. No. I mean, because I do
It's an inside joke.
Yeah, okay. I do radio. I work in radio frequencies. I don't really care about what's optical and what's like in different areas of the spectrum. But probably some people would care about lasers.
A lot of
People that want to use them.
Huh?
We have lots of people that want to use them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, it's the same. I mean, this Aronia spectrum analyzer also has the potential of transmitting, which I find that it's okay if it's in an anechoic chamber, if it's very well isolated. Sure, transmit. It's fine. Nobody will see that signal.
Yeah.
But don't just plug an antenna on the TX output of the spectrum analyzer and start broadcasting, because it's it's a risk. I've seen that. There are some passive satellites that do operate in the radio astronomy band around 1400 megahertz, which is a purely passive band. Like, you would never find. You're not supposed to find any signal. And these guys, they observe the Earth at these frequencies, and they do see transmitters at these frequencies. So what they do is they report them to the FCC or the ITU or local frequency regulators, and they and these people get fined, and like they're in trouble.
So what do you guys do for recordings? How do you go about recording such lengthy time frames? Being that we're going to be doing it in the cloud, do you have any recommendations on all that?
It's hard. It depends on your computational capacity to process the data in real time. If you can compress the data enough to store everything, great. Then you can just record compressed data sets. That's fine. What we do is we record baseband data for a few hours, and then spend a few hours offline to reduce the data and analyze the data. Recording everything is just, you just don't have enough storage for that.
Right.
So putting some effort in real-time data processing to reduce the data as much as possible and then record everything should be, in my opinion, a priority. If you don't mind having times off, then record everything for as much time as you can. I don't know what cloud services you're using. For instance, Amazon Web Services, they provide you with a couple terabytes of data. You can fill this storage, but you will have to process them and reduce them, archive them, which should that's something that I don't know exactly what kind of data you're recording and what's the size of the data, but it's something that you should really come up with a plan for to make sure everything is thought of. But the way we do it, as I said, just recording based on data. We have observation time frames that go anywhere from 2 hours up to maybe 6 hours, and then we spend as much time reducing the data, running the analysis for signal detection, logging this information. signal logging is like nothing. You put everything in a CSV file.
Right,
It's all good. But yeah, that's the way we do it.
So what we're doing now is we're building an AI to we've got several members that have sky cams that point to the sky, and they record whatever it records, and we then take that and we train the AI what's a plane, what's a bug, what's a bird, blah blah blah. And the idea is so that it will not record that data. Now what does get recorded is anything outside of those parameters.
Yeah.
So on the spectrum analyzer, you could train the same thing. I'm sorry, we could set it up to where the analyzer records 24/7, and then I guess maybe go in and have the AI only pull out spikes of certain frequencies, certain amplitudes. I don't know, just throwing out an option there. The other way, I guess, to do that would be because if you were to try and program the analyzer at that point, you're programming it to stay within its channel, whatever you're going to program it to stay within. And I don't think we want to do that. I think we want to leave it open and record everything and only hold on to what we think is important. So it feels like it has to be just like I said, everything's got to be recorded, and then the AI pulls out what we want to keep. Everything else it throws away. Does that make sense?
That's the way to go. Yeah. A team from Canada is actually building up a spectrum monitor because one of the issue in spectrum management is detecting new signals, new transmissions, and trying to stop them from transmitting as soon as possible. So they build up a machine learning algorithm that they call novelty detection, signal novelty detection, which consists in training AI in an unsupervised manner to find out signals that are recurring. Of course, a human will eventually be like, okay, I know what signal that is, and that's fine. I'm going to deal with that. But the AI is supposed to detect a novel signal that hasn't been seen before, and download the voltage data or as much information as possible about the signal, so that we can then go back in the field, try to find out what transmitter that is, and turn them off, basically. So this is, I think, I can also point you to the papers that describe this algorithm. I think this is running in TensorFlow, which is a Python library that does very easy to run machine learning with, so they just record waterfall plots and run an unsupervised machine learning algorithm on it.
Well, since you brought Python up, that's the number one question a lot of guys would like to ask about. Did you see my question about recommending a good lightweight? What are your thoughts on that?
About the video streaming?
About lightweight Python library for video streaming?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any experience in that.
Okay. What are you guys using?
We don't do video processing. We do only radio data processing. So yeah, It's just no video processing.
Okay. So what location, if you were to put one of these, where would you put it? These stations?
So
outside of Catalina Island. Outside of Catalina Island.
So what I think is very important is to get back to any UAP sighting that's been detected, any sighting, keeping track of the lat long, the coordinates of the detection, and plot each of these detections on a map. That's, in my opinion, that's first stage of anything. There are many reasons why some UAP, mostly because there hasn't been a detector at the location. I don't know if you guys have access to the data or like the coordinates of each of the detections, but what's really important is plot on a map the locations of all the different sightings, and this should be the place where you put your detector.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
Don't put a detector where nothing has been detected because that's just
no,
a
I
waste
got
of.
that. I just thought
Yeah.
maybe you had some suggestions on some hot spots. Like we already know about Utah, we already know about Catalina Island, but I didn't know if there was somewhere else that you might recommend.
Oh,
Um,
the hotspots, as I said, the hotspots should be where most detections are. And this, I don't know if the Navy report on UAPs gives locations of those detections. But if you have them, then yeah, put all these detections as little dots on a map, and that's your hotspots.
yeah, I agree. Okay.
So may I put a question, Greg?
Yeah, sure.
You have seen Skinwalker Ranch, one or two episodes, I assume. Um,
Yeah.
by watching what they do with their spectrum analyzer and what they say as an analysis, it's short. I know it's edited by History Channel and what have you. It's only some parts. What is your impression of that? Is there really something in this 1.6, or do you? It's just a feeling. You can't say because you have not done any research yet. I know, but just from your gut feeling when you watch it, do you think it's only GPS and GLONASS and Galileo and nothing else?
Yeah, it has to. If really someone detected a 1.6 gigahertz that was not GLONASS, as I said, it would be reported to the ITU or the FCC, and they just could not. I mean, put it this way: the most natural answer to that question is yes, it is GLONASS because GLONASS is allocated that particular frequency because the signal that's been seen on the spectrum analyzer looks exactly like the signal of GLONASS. That's enough for me to just confirm. And I think one of the big reports I have about the Skinwalker Ranch, and you're probably right, Richard, it's probably just because it's been edited and over-edited and lots of information is missing in the show. But there is no actual scientific protocol that's in place. Like it seems like these guys are just going from one experiment to another, and it's just like blindly, running some experiment, and they find something, and that's enough for them to. It's dramatic. It's just dramatic, and that's a show. Let's keep in mind it's a show. What I want to see is reports, memos, to see what kind of experiments they've done to really confirm that this is a signal that seems abnormal. Um, as I said before, the 1.6 gigahertz, very easy to confirm or not that it's GLONASS is put the same Yagi antenna on the orbit of a GLONASS satellite and see if the signal comes back.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure it's going to come back. But that's what these guys should do, and they probably did that, right? They probably did that, but
It was not in the movie.
editors behind the show, they just need to, like they need audience for that show, so they need to be dramatic, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I believe I'm 100% on board with exactly what you're saying. But there's one thing that bothers me about all this, about that concept, is that I've spoken with them off camera, privately, and without really going into fine details of everything I've discussed with them. One, they're very solid with this 1.6. They're convinced that there's something there, and they're going to keep going. They're going to keep going after that. And two, dude, they're spending $100,000 in equipment just to chase this down. So it's like, okay,
But look,
I'm having.
they have the money. They just have the money. It's History Channel. They have
Oh,
a
I
lot of
get
money.
it. I get it.
They need to show equipment on the show because if not, like the audience will be like, "But what are you guys doing? Like you're just like not using the equipment that's available."
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, as I said, it's if really they put in a procedure, a protocol to confirm that the signal that they detected is not GLONASS, and they should be aware that the 1.6 gigahertz, and or maybe it's not GLONASS, maybe it's something else. But again, if you find the signal at 1 point whatever you said before, 64 gigahertz, then look at the allocation chart. Look what service is transmitting at that frequency, and run an experiment that allows you to detect the same signal, but in a more controlled manner. If really you're looking at the satellite, at the path of a satellite, and the signal doesn't show up, but then it shows up where there is no satellite, that's actually interesting information.
Yeah.
But this I haven't seen on the show. Like on the show, they just put a random antenna in a random location, really like directional antenna, but in a random location. They find a signal. Nothing surprising. Look at the ephemeris of the satellite, and I'm sure you're gonna find a satellite that passed by. Not necessarily in the main lobe of the antenna. Maybe it's through a side lobe. It's not necessarily like really in the direction of the pointing direction of the antenna. But I'm sure there's gonna be a satellite around in space in the sky. Like there are always satellites in the sky. I really would like to have a chat with them because I think they must have been thinking. So either it's completely BS and their goal is just to be dramatic and have the audience like really getting the audience excited, or they are scientists and the editing of the show just doesn't demonstrate or doesn't show the actual scientific protocol that he used. And I'm sure because these people have, they're engineers and PhDs, they must have either no ethics and doing whatever, but like not necessarily conducting a scientific protocol, or they are legit and they must have been thinking about all that, and that's important information. I'm surprised there's no report memos that could be consulted online about all the experiment they did. I think they should.
Right.
That's
No,
step number one.
I'm 100% on board with what you're saying because Dr. Travis Taylor, that's on the show, he is. I mean, if you look at his background, the guy is incredible as far as all these degrees that he's got when it comes to astro and everything else around it. But he is also a TV talent, and he knows how to pull the strings, right? How to wow, check that out! I can't imagine where did that come from. Yeah, I get that. I mean that sells episodes.
He's only a human, right? And telling you because I work in academia, you don't make much money. You make much more money as a TV presenter than a researcher at a university. So I don't blame him.
Yeah. So what I'm hoping though is I think honestly I already had those same thoughts that you did as far as it's either this or it's that. So that's why I put it. That's why I asked you before I went to them to say, hey, can I put you guys together? Because if I put you guys together,
Yeah.
let me say it this way. If I approach them and say, let's do this, and they back off, then I know they're full of shit. Then I know that this is all just a ploy. And they don't want to give up.
Yes, or they're busy with other things and they don't have time to, I guess it would, they don't know me. I'm not necessarily legit to their eyes. But it's, maybe let's try that. Let's try to dig a little bit deeper in that. There is a concern on their side about this 1.6 gigahertz. Let's find out what that signal is. And also, I would recommend, I guess some of you or maybe have some radio equipment. What I did yesterday is just I put a log periodic antenna towards the sky, plugged in a spectrum analyzer, whatever you have, and looked at the 1.6 gigahertz. And I would love if you guys, if any of you, try that as well. I found the signal all the time. It's always there. I was expecting to see a stronger signal when there was a satellite pass. I was monitoring the ephemeris of the satellites, and there was one that was supposed to be nearby, but I missed it. And I think I missed it because of the directionality of the antenna, and also my antenna was not very sensitive. But if any of you have antennas that are sensitive at 1.6 gigahertz, put them in your backyard or anywhere on your rooftop or whatever, and monitor this for like 24 hours or so. And let's have a conversation about whether you do see the same thing that I see, which is a signal that's always present. If it's always present,
I see the signal is always there.
Okay. Yep. There you go. Yeah.
Where are you located at?
Texas.
Oh. Well,
I can
Bjorn is.
I can actually share a screen and show you exactly.
Okay.
what-
Different.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Bjorn is in Florida, and he's got the same signal, receiving the same signal.
You know what bothers me, Greg? For example, Tommy sent me the antenna, hyperlog antenna. You know, so
Same one you have. Same one you have.
yeah, where I can point my antenna. Let's say for beginning, give me some sense of where I can point antenna for to searching for 1.6D.
Oh.
Yeah. Just. I mean, it should be everywhere. So I use a log periodic antenna. Put it to the zenith. Just pointing at the zenith, and you should see the signal.
Yes, I did, and I see signal all the time.
Okay, well there you go. Then you've detected it. But what you could do is okay. So if you Google GLONASS live tracking,
Yeah.
there's a website. I don't exactly remember what the name of the website is, but they show you a map and they show you the orbit of the satellites, and they sort of show you when the next pass of the next satellite is the closest to you. And then you will have to use your own judgment to try to point your antenna towards the orbit of that satellite.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I think they give you coordinates like an azimuth and elevation of where the signal, what the satellite. Sorry?
You can use
Okay.
Stellarium for that and actually get
Yeah,
the.
exactly. Yeah, you should. Yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah, I think Stellarium does that as well.
So Ido, what are you using
Were
for
you able to
software?
see the signal?
What
Move to
software
the
is
screen
this?
again.
Bring it back. Yeah, there we go. So that looks
Yeah.
exactly like the one he just showed us, actually.
Yeah.
So what? Sorry, it's hard to see the frequency axis. What are we? What's the frequency range?
The frequency range. Which I knew it's a new software that I started using.
I know they're not making it easy, do they?
Ido, we cannot see the figures on the scale. So
Yeah, zoom in on it. It's way too small.
Oh,
can you tell us what the axes are?
just a second.
Okay,
I'll take a screenshot. I'll take a screenshot and I'll send it in the a bit easier for me. Actually, I probably won't.
You know what your resolution bandwidth is?
The what? Sorry.
Resolution bandwidth?
Resolution bandwidth. I think that's the zoom, right? This one? No.
I'm not sure. I don't know the software, but it's.
I'm still not familiar with the
Yeah. All right.
Oh,
Yeah, take some time. I mean, clearly there's a
width.
signal there.
Yeah.
The width is wide, but I don't know more than that. I can do 2.8.
I think the GLONASS signal should be about 500 kilohertz wide.
Oh,
So you can maybe confirm that.
500 kilohertz watt wide.
Yeah, that's less than that.
No, that's not.
That might be a carrier signal. That might be just like
Yeah, this one is very narrow.
yeah. So that's what most transmitters do. They have a strong carrier signal, which looks like a peak, a very narrow peak in the spectrum, which helps the receivers to lock on a particular frequency and helps demodulating the signal. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
You got it. So that's like the kickstart of the signal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah.
Cool.
Lionel.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, Greg. Quick
Hey, Jonas.
question for you. If you could go into a bit more details about the algorithm you use to detect signals with the radio spectrums. What kind of machine learning algorithm do you usually use? It's been good.
Yeah. So we're running our detection algorithm on waterfall plots, which it's important for us to do time and frequency detection. So the idea is simple: long integration detection of the peaks, and by long integration is not necessarily just simple integration over time. That we also use a D-Doppler algorithm. So the Doppler effect means that the frequency shifts
Yeah.
and the motion for SETI in particular is given mostly by the Earth rotation. Because the Earth rotates, you have necessarily a motion that's non-negligible between the transmitter and the receiver. So we need to, if you imagine the waterfall plot being like an image, we sort of integrate just over time, or we like try out different Doppler drifts over time, and we integrate, not necessarily vertically, but also like in diagonal. We integrate that way, and we try to use different Doppler rates. I think we usually use from minus 5 hertz per second to plus 5 hertz per second as a Doppler shift. And so we just do multiple integrations, try to find the largest peak that we have. And the machine learning really doesn't work on the waterfall plots. It works on the logs of all the signals that we've detected. So if you imagine, we run observations over hours and hours and years, and we have massive amounts of detections, signals that are detected. The machine learning, what it does is tell you if there is sort of a repetition of the same signal over and over, which in that case, it's usually radio frequency interference, like local transmitters. But if there is something that hasn't been seen before, that's a signal that's worth looking at. I can.
Is it
Remind me, I'm gonna shut.
autoencoder?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. We're using this kind of. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I guess I have a few papers. I think I mentioned many references, but I can definitely point you to some papers that describe this kind of algorithm that we're using.
And sorry, I just joined the call. What was the name of your project?
Oh, so we're working on SETI. We're just doing, and by the way, SETI is not really the term that's used anymore because it's a little bit too restrictive in what we're doing. It's a search for technosignatures, which, SETI is a little bit changed. And by the way, SETI is a research program. I know there's a SETI Institute, which ironically does no SETI. They're mostly doing astronomy. I worked at Berkeley, which operates the Breakthrough Listen search, which is $100 million for a search for 10 years by a Russian billionaire who just decided to detect ET as fast as possible. So I'm writing a program right now on a French telescope, actually, which is like low frequency search for technosignatures. And many people do SETI, search for technosignatures around the Earth, worldwide searches.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Greg, what is your goal with this 2000 dishes 19 by 15 kilometer array? What's the goal of SETI here?
So, well, SETI is one of the programs that we're using, but for a long time, radio telescopes were just, used to observe in one direction, and we do what I described before, which is observation for a few hours and then post-processing, and that's the way it worked. Now, we want to kind of change the paradigm in which astronomy works, and we want to image in real time the sky. So it's really building a radio camera, a camera that operates at radio frequencies. So now the rate is still not the rate of an actual camera. It's going to be one frame every 15 minutes, but the processing happens in real time. So every 15 minutes you have a different image of a different part of the sky, and this instrument will be surveying the whole sky at a very high sensitivity, something that's unprecedented. And and we expect detection of 100 billion sources, radio sources in the sky that haven't been detected before. We are looking for fast radio bursts, which are like very strong transients that are detected from like distant galaxies. And then SETI is part of it also. We're gonna have a frame per hertz, so every 15 minutes, one image frame per hertz of frequency bandwidth, 1 hertz, and we're gonna detect something that like a bright spot in the sky, which means that you have the localization of the source of the transmitter. So is it an exoplanet? Is it just a spacecraft that's flying around? Is it whatever? And we can track it in time as well, which is great.
So when you say whole sky, do you mean horizon to horizon?
Beyond, actually, because we use the Earth rotation, so you're gonna see the whole sky, like literally the whole sky, everything's around the Earth. That's accessible from the northern hemisphere. Yes, so it goes horizon to horizon, but like if you imagine the array will point in one direction of the sky for 15 minutes, which means it's going to track the sky because the sky moves, right, compared to the Earth. So we're tracking, and that's what we call the pointing direction. And then every 15 minutes, we're going to change the pointing direction, and slowly we're going to build the image of the whole sky. But yeah, we're mostly going to detect everything in real time as well.
And that, just to be clear, that 1 15-minute span that does get horizon to horizon. So you're getting the entire space in the northern hemisphere in one shot.
No. It's one pointing direction. It's only one pointing direction, which has the size of the field of view of the telescope, and the field of view of the telescope is given by the size of the dishes, which is 5 meters. So it's a pretty wide field of view, I think, in astronomy. I think at the lowest frequencies, it would be about a couple degrees wide. So you image at the lowest frequencies, you image a couple degrees wide, and at the higher frequencies, around 2 gigahertz, it's a couple of arc minutes of field of view.
And what's the lowest frequency you can detect? Could you detect below 1 hertz? If there's a signal below 1 hertz?
No. So the telescope operates from 700 megahertz to 2 gigahertz. But for SETI, we look at 1 hertz bandwidth.
Wow.
So yeah,
1 hertz bandwidth.
Nice.
Yeah, very narrow.
Oh, okay, that's very
very narrow. Well, very narrow because one of the assumption for SETI is that the signal that will be transmitted by a serialization would be a very narrow band signal close to a sine wave, which has many reasons for it. One of them is that it's probably the most economical way of being detected and saving energy, because the wider your signal is, the more energy you need to put in it for being detectable, and we're talking about large distances. Yeah, that's right. So you want to put as much energy in a very narrow bandwidth, so that on the other side it's a massive peak. You cannot miss it if you're sensitive enough, of course. It's a massive peak, and there it is. And also, sine waves are, of course, the building block of many types of modulation, communication signals modulations. So it's just natural to look for this kind of signals. And wideband signals also have other issues, which is they get dispersed in time and frequency over long duration in the universe, because some molecules, they do absorb some frequencies, but not all of them, and so a wideband signal might not be as efficient to transmit a signal. So narrowband is like kind of the way to go. Like personally, if I had to transmit a signal to a distant civilization, I would probably use a sine wave. Yeah. It's also not natural, right? There's no natural source, no natural radio source that transmits something that looks like a sine wave. It just doesn't exist. So it's pretty easy to distinguish between natural sources and artificial sources.
Okay. Would that make sense? Would that make sense in using small devices with very narrow bandwidth? So, for instance, if we just take the 1.6 and let's say 50 megahertz to the left and to the right, and we split this in 1 hertz
Yeah.
bandwidth and crush it with a huge computer system, is that feasible?
It's that's a big question. It only makes sense if you're looking for something that's narrowband. If you want to detect reliably and accurately a signal, you need to match the bandwidth of that signal.
Of
In your
the
spectrum
original
analyzer, there's
signal. Mm.
yeah, that's
But
right.
if the original
That's where
signal
you
is unknown, I mean, how can?
exactly. Well, then I mean, we put some parameters on what kind of signal we want to find. For sure, if the signal is wideband, we will just not detect it because at 1 hertz resolution, you have not much power in a 1 hertz bandwidth because most of the power is spread over a lot of
Yeah.
channels.
All
So you
looks
just
like noise.
yeah. So you would miss it.
Mm.
But if the signal is 1 hertz wide, or if it's like a sine wave or something, then yes, you detect it. Now, if you're looking for a signal that's like 10 megahertz wide, and you look at it with a 1 hertz frequency resolution, most likely you will not detect it because it's just it's not appropriate. I think what would make sense if the computational power was there is to look at different frequency bandwidth. So resolution bandwidth. For instance, you would run one observe one spectrum at a 1 hertz resolution, another one 1 kilohertz resolution, another one at 1 megahertz resolution, or something like that, and detect the signal in those different spectra. That's the best you could do. If you really don't want to miss a signal, you need diversity in the resolution of your spectra.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
Did you hear the audio tone that came out of that 1.6 signal? That when Travis was playing it through the spectrum analyzer, did you hear that tone?
Yeah. No, that's. I mean, I'm not surprised. So you can use the Aeronia or most spectrum analyzers now. They can just demodulate a signal using FM demodulation. If your signal is not FM, then you're gonna always hear something like that. It's like a sort of chirping, a little bit of like sine wave ish. Yeah, I was actually not surprised about the sound that I heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you see the episode where Travis Taylor and I think Thomas Winton was in and Dragon was in the same room when they heard themselves as a kind of a feedback loop where the spectrum analyzer plays back something that actually they were saying, broadcasting kind of.
Yeah,
There must be a sensor somewhere, doesn't it? Or is there a way that to spoof the spectrum analyzer in such way?
there is a way. So I had a conversation. I haven't watched the episode, but Tommy and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about this. I think you described me the experiment, and I was like, well, remember that it's a show, and in that show, these people, even though you don't see it, they're wearing microphones, and they're most likely wearing, and it's almost certain they're using wireless microphones, right? So they all have the little mic, the little transmitter in the back of in their back. The RF environment is just not appropriate to do any RF research because if you have like Wi-Fi microphones and microphones, that means there are also antennas on the other side. They might have like whatever. I saw one of the first episodes like they're wearing these little watches that are transmitting Wi-Fi signals like all over the place. I'm actually not surprised that the spectrum analyzer, by induction on the cables, picked up the signal from the microphones.
Okay.
Not something I'm surprised about.
In such clearness, that was surprising to me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure this experiment is reproducible.
Okay.
If there was one or two, they could show it. It could be like, hey, sorry guys, we got excited, but actually we can reproduce that.
My thought about that was the same thing, that it's that the analyzer's got to be picking that signal up. But what bothered me is that the antennas for that spectrum analyzer are on the outside of the building. It's a Yagi. You saw it. It's not an omnidirectional antenna, so it's not like there's an
Yeah,
antenna inside that room picking that stuff up.
So yes, there is, because the cable between the spectrum analyzer and the antenna is an antenna itself. It's a dipole,
Right.
actually. And I think the signal is picked up through induction on that cable. I don't think it's captured from the antenna itself.
If it's an
Okay.
unshielded
Yeah.
cable.
Right.
Yeah. If you put everything in a Faraday cage, then the story would be different. But yeah.
I just assumed that the cable was shielded, but you're right. I ship my antennas out and they're not shielded.
Why in the
Exactly,
world
that
are
is-
unshielded cables existing at all? Okay, different question.
Every station we're going to put in, people are going to put in unshielded cables. We can't get around it.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
See?
I don't want to buy all new cables.
Well, you could just go get some tinfoil out of your wife's cabinet and just wrap the cable in that.
Yeah.
You can do that. Yeah. That's right. That works.
That's for the guys that already have like 100 cables and they don't want to go buy one shielded.
Yeah. But then when you have multiple cables, like they induce each other as well. Like it's not. Yeah. It's for our spectrum monitoring, we're using shielded cables, and they're very expensive. Like a
Okay.
few feet of cable is like thousands of dollars. It's ridiculous.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no. It's like, well, we want something that's low loss, so not much attenuation in the cable, and also completely shielded. It's very expensive. Like you have your normal coaxial cable that you can buy at whatever store. That is like I don't know, you get like 10 meters, 100 meters for like nothing. And then you have your shielded one that's used for experiments, scientific experiments in particular. And they're very, very expensive. Thousands of dollars.
But there are shielded, let's say, network cables, for example, that are just double the price of an unshielded one. So you get an unshielded one for 50 centimeter, and you get a shielded one for €1 for the meter, for example. So is
I got a
from
50
your point of view, is such a shielded cable, let's say a Cat5, Cat6 cable shielded, fair enough for use with a spectrum analyzer, or is this already below grade, low grade?
It really depends. If you're trying to find a signal, if the signal is always there, you know that it's interference between your cables. If it's a signal that you've seen once and not at any other time, then you know it's a real signal.
All right.
It's not necessary that you're going to have interference. It depends on your sensitivity, your amplifiers and stuff. You might not even see that interference. But if you want to do something that's if you want to go to 100 minus 170 dBm of sensitivity, then yes, you're going to start dealing with self-induction effects on the cables and stuff. But if you don't go as low in sensitivity, and you don't have to because you're trying to find some signals that are pretty strong, I don't think that's a concern of yours.
All right.
You can go for the cheap version. I think that's fine.
All right.
And it's all about testing, right? Like you need to try out with a cheap version. If that doesn't work, then you're gonna have to redesign the thing. But try out with a cheap and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. Any question, Matti? Question from your side, probably.
Not really. Just
Okay.
keep up the good work, guys. So all this kind of shielding stuff, it's completely normal. All the coaxial cables are in principle shielded, but of course there's plenty of different grades. And interference, if it's strong, like next to the measurement device, can go many ways. Like it can induce itself to the power cord, or the actual measurement device is not fully shielded, so it can directly come into the device. So this is just completely, normal stuff for the RF. So if you take the modulation of the microphone like 1 meter away, that's nothing, Yeah, just a normal interference.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So if you think about how our system is going to operate, where it's based entirely on optical detection, and then you've got this suite of ancillary sensors that will just record continually, but only save the data that's associated with events that the optical system has triggered as something suspicious, right? So if we had something like a Kraken SDR, which is one of the ones we're looking at for our sort of higher tier stations, and we're just taking snapshots of radio frequencies from whatever range, from whatever we can measure with this thing, and just saving them. With that information, being that it's correlated with an actual event, something we don't know in the sky, would that radio information, those logs, be useful to your research, or would those just be too much of a snapshot to be helpful?
I mean, I'm not looking for a UAP in a day-to-day job. We are looking for distant civilizations, like something that's like very out of space. So
Yeah.
no, it wouldn't matter. I should also mention that having seen footage of UAPs and like having seen what these motions, the motions of those UAPs are, it's clear that a directional antenna will just not track one of these. It's just too fast. They're really fast. They move in a chaotic way, unpredictable way. I would definitely go with an omnidirectional antenna. Because if there's something that's transmitted, you would see that before it appeared, there's no signal. When it appears, there's a signal, and after it disappears, there's no signal anymore. And you can confirm that there's a signal transmitted by this UAP. But go omnidirectional. Directional, of course, it gives you better sensitivity, and if there is a signal, it increases the chances of detecting it, but you will just never be able to track it.
Now, including the ones that go like 10,000 miles an hour straight into the ocean, we're probably not going to catch those, but we could catch some of the quicker ones with our pan tilt zoom setup. Would that
explain that to him, because I don't think he knows about the fact that we're going to have a pointing antenna.
Well, we have a pointing camera, and we're thinking about putting an antenna on it, so it would track only as good as our can track. Which we tried it with security camera setups, but they were too slow. They were too cumbersome. They have troubles tracking a Cessna flying across the sky. But if we can get a fast slew and a good track, I mean, we could get some of the non-insane ones, hopefully.
Yeah, but what kind of antenna are you going to use? Because you need something lightweight if you want to move as fast as the UAP. The problem is, if you want lightweight, that means small antenna, that means sensitive at high frequencies, and you will miss out on the whole low frequency section. You will just not be sensitive. And it's a way to go. If you want something, you could probably just have an array of antennas, like the 3D array that Tommy showed earlier, which is usually wider bandwidth, and you can record the signal omnidirectionally of all the different antennas, and post processing you can beamform in the direction of the UAP. Which that's probably the best way of if I wanted to detect something like that, I would go this way. Or I would just go omnidirectional and confirm that and see the signal like anywhere coming from anywhere. But because it's just antennas are heavy. Antennas, it's metal. It's if you want something big that goes to low frequencies, I mean we're talking about antennas that are like a few meters large. That will not move at the pace of your camera.
True. So I think the Kraken SDR, for example, with the 4 or 5 channels it already has, is more for our passive radar approach. The idea of buoyant to attach an antenna directly on the scope, which is pointed to a UAP in the sky, is it's bound to the size of the scope because it cannot be larger and wider, so it is reduced in its functionality. Yes. Question is, we have to find out, Brett. So we have to test.
Yeah.
So with the passive radar, you can actually have, if you're lucky to have some information about the velocity of the target and maybe some bearing, but yeah.
So the bearing shall come from an array of, let's say, 4 or 5 channel antennas on 4 or 5 channels on the Kraken SDR analyzer. I think with 4 antennas, triangulation should be possible. And yeah, the idea is just on the plan, it's just on paper, is that we create an external pan tilt head with a dish. And we're still not discussed yet how big the dish will be or what kind of antenna that will carry.
Is it best to have a dish or a Yagi or other types of antenna?
Greg?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. If you want to do pan tilts quickly, a dish is it's even less recommended. Dish is great. I mean, dish is, if you have a dish, if you can access a dish, perfect, because you have the best sensitivity, you have the best collecting area, amazing. Yagi, directional, but a bit less sensitive, and but much easier to move around. Because think about a dish. I mean, it's just normal mechanics, right? First of all, it's heavy. So moving it's just good at a certain pace, and also wind gets absorbed in the dish, so it makes it even slower to move.
True.
Yagi much better because a Yagi is just it's a mesh, and air doesn't really, it's not an issue. But it can be heavy, like a Yagi that goes to I don't know, a few megahertz, down to a few megahertz of frequencies. It's a few meters long. That's the problem. Like moving this is. So yeah, I would recommend a couple dipoles, a couple omnidirectional dipoles. You do post-processing beamforming / triangulation, and that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other issue is power consumption of whatever motors you're going to use for this thing to move it around. We're
There you
trying
go.
to conserve power, trying to stay within the solar 12-volt power.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. Like some rotators work on 12 volts, and that's fine, but it's just well, no, actually they're slow. They're pretty slow. Yeah. So see, if you go omnidirectional, like it's just the best option because no moving parts, which means also think about the fatigue, the material fatigue that it's moving.
Yeah.
At some point, it doesn't move anymore. And you don't want that. You don't want maintenance. When you design a system, think about the maintenance. Like, do we have to change the motor every year, or do we want to never have to change any motor because there's no motor on the system? It's much better.
Yeah. And the more elaborate you go on the motor, as far as whether it's oil-based or not, really adds to the expense.
Yeah.
Especially the torque that you need to be able to move your weight around.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, exactly.
Would a dish of, let's say, satellite dish size, would that be feasible for our purpose, or can you dismiss it as rubbish? Greg?
Like 8-foot dish or
Yeah.
6-foot dish?
No, I mean, if we talk about a dish, a pan tilt dish that can be moved, do we talk about 5-meter dishes, or can even like satellite dishes, like TV satellite dishes, do?
Well, some TV satellite dishes are pretty big actually, and like here in the US, it's like massive dishes. Not the same as in Europe because of the latitude. Simply the latitude makes it like harder to pick up the signal. So, I mean, one option would be you must have seen this kind of radars that's usually around the Air Force bases or airports. Some airports they have a radome in which there is a dish that just turns around all the time. And instead, one approach, if you wanted to have high sensitivity with a dish, would be to use this kind of system. It could be like a small dish like this in a little radome that just spins around, and it gives you spectra versus angle, bearing angle, which I know you're not tracking the UAP, but you can confirm that the UAP is transmitting a signal whenever you find a signal in the direction of the UAP. That's a possibility of doing that. But it's also rotating, and that means maintenance. That means changing parts of it whenever it breaks. And if really you want to have 500,000 stations across the world, it's gonna be first of all expensive, but also like a lot of maintenance, a lot of
Mhm.
issues, mechanical issues.
Yeah, we're working on that.
Yeah.
We're selling NFTs. You want to buy one?
Says the salesman.
Call me back. I'm gonna think about it.
There's the salesman. Get out. Okay. Hey, Tommy, any other questions on your list?
Well, you covered them all. Well, the only other thing I would ask is, what are your thoughts about us going after Catalina Island? Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, same thing as I said before. Try to find out each detection and the coordinates of these detections. Look at where these detections are, and put systems where these detections are. And I'm not surprised that those detections are above the ocean, because that's where the Air Force tries. They're safe. They can go. They can break the sound barrier
I can't
easily.
guarantee Cross will come, but I can come as your friend. You win. She shot.
What is that?
Where's that coming from?
That's very scary. That's very scary.
Where's the?
We're
where did
talking
the-
about UAPs, and now we
Her
gotta.
hands latching onto my arms. She shook me in excitement.
Dude,
Is this your side, Tommy?
I already knew this was a bad idea.
somebody invaded our.
Tommy, is this coming from your side?
Where's the alien at? Come on now.
Exactly.
What?
Shut up.
It ain't coming from me.
All right.
Good, you have a recording, right, Richard? You have a recording of that, just in case.
But pardon me once again.
Although I do have a Bluetooth speaker right here, so I wonder if it's picking up somebody's Bluetooth in the area.
Possible, yeah. Someone, must have connected to the Bluetooth.
You guys heard that as well, right?
Everyone.
Yeah,
Right.
you got hacked.
It couldn't have been from me. It had to have been a direct feed, because it would have been way off in the background if it was me.
Yeah.
Wow. That.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. Glad we recorded that. Now we can go
Yes,
back and
we
watch
recorded it. I'm just checking. Yes, on record.
that. Hey, does you guys see a UAP in the air? Look outside real quick. Hurry. Check the SDR. Is there a spike? Where's it at?
So first of all,
Also check
Tommy,
for the van.
I would check for shielded cables. Get rid of the unshielded ones.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, we actually literally reproduced the Skinwalker Ranch episode right now. Exactly what just happened.
Probably.
I will send you a
I
copy
mean,
of this.
to get back to your question, Tommy, find out the coordinates of where the. So there's a lot of Air Force traffic over the ocean, because it's just an easy way to do, combat situation stuff. And that's the reason why there are so many sightings over the ocean. It's just because, I mean, if these planes would fly over the country, you would see as many over the country, I believe. But we know that some have been detected over the ocean. Find the coordinates of these detections and put a system there. That's just my recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Well, we
Catalina
already had
Islands.
the goal. I'm sorry. Go ahead. We already had the goal. So yeah, I was just curious if you had
no.
thoughts about it.
Well, that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Cool.
We will, certainly. Okay, if there is no other question from any one of you, last chance.
Yeah.
Oh, Lionel.
Yeah. Sorry, it's not especially for Greg. Thing is, I got a telescope this week, and I don't know which. I cannot make it work. There's the pointing thing here.
Yeah.
I try to aim at something with this, and then there's the other end, and I put the lens in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which lens to use. I have a SR 4mm, H20mm, and 12.5. And so which one should I used to just look at a star.
Well, those are
Get them-
millimeters as far as your magnification. So the smaller the number, the larger you'll see it in your. I'm sorry, vice versa. The larger the number, the more you'll see it in your viewfinder. So you said you got a 24 there, right?
I got
Or is it a
20,
20?
12.5.
Okay.
Able to look at the trees in front of my house with the 12.5. That's all I've managed to focus on.
So the problem is that the further you go with the object that you're trying to look at,
Yeah.
the harder it is. You need to increase the size of your aperture. So the further, like if you're looking at the moon, you'd use a 12. If you're
Is
looking
it
at Jupiter, you would use a.
this?
This is a re-
So for
this is
I'm
a-
looking at stars. I try to look at stars.
Yeah, I would get rid of the long tube. The long tube is, I think it is
It's not
a
useful.
rectifier. It turns the image upside down. It's for
Just move
moon
it.
pictures.
So that's
Get rid of
not
that
useful.
one.
Okay.
Get rid of that one. Yeah,
Okay. So
you can.
so to look at stars.
Okay. Yeah.
20
we take-
or which one? 20, that should allow me to look at stars?
With
Yes.
any kind, you can look at stars. The most important point that you have is to get something in focus. So mount your
Yes. And
ocular.
is
and
this how you
then-
get
yes,
focus?
then you make the focus.
Okay,
Exactly.
that's it. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And this bit is not useful then.
I know such tubes only for getting for example, the moon upside down correctly, because normally you see things upside down on the wrong way.
Okay. And there's the
It's a
pointing
fine camera,
device.
yeah.
And so this I understand. And this hole, what do you think this for the second hole? Yeah. No?
No idea.
Okay.
Weight saving? Style?
Well, that's
Style, design.
design.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
they wanted to have less plastic to make it lighter weight.
So
Yeah, it's a toy stuff. It's a toy telescope, but I think, I don't know. Yeah, I'll try.
Aerodynamic. You can now have wind coming through there.
okay, so Tommy, I think we're done with our questions, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Greg, for your time.
Yes.
Sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. And yeah, if we can keep in touch via Tommy with you for maybe other questions that arise in the future, we'd be happy
Yeah.
to point to you if you allow us to.
No, absolutely. Yeah, keep me in the loop. I will try to send a few papers and references to papers and documents that I mentioned today.
Perfect.
And yeah, just keep me in the loop, and I can help whenever is needed.
Okay, perfect. Because we will certainly go also in passive radar direction next year.
Okay.
And yeah, we take any professional we can get on the deck, let's say.
Sure. Yeah. No. Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you very
Great.
much for having you here.
Yeah. Thank you
No
much.
problem. Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Have a good day or night or wherever you are.
All right. Yeah, guys.
We
so,
got all time zones covered.
I also closed the developer meeting for the day. It was not a developer chat as we normally do. It was a special with Dr. Greg Hellbourg here. And so that's why any question you want to raise for what we normally do in a developer meeting, we have to postpone to next week, or we handle them on our channels, on Signal or on Discord. All right? Everyone agrees?
All right.
Yep.
Hey,
Okay.
I did my job. Now y'all go to work.
Perfect. Okay, guys.
Excellent.
I wish you a
All
pleasant
right.
Take
Sunday.
care. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So, Richard,
Wait a
so
sec.